Hi, y'all have been asking and telling me to talk about Cheyenne Bryant for a long time, and I hadn't covered it yet because I work for myself. I was doing other stuff this year, like earning lawsuit threats. Her situation seemed to have come to a head as of this week. So I actually dropped what I was doing and prioritized this based on the research I was able to pull together. She's almost definitely a fraud, and I can back that up. So FD covered the ethical side of the situation recently, but he didn't look into the credentials piece. Allow me to pick that ball up and run with it. I don't blame you if you haven't heard of her before. Let's knock out a basic rundown of the resume. Cheyenne Bryant is a social media celebrity, producer of MTV's Teen Mom Family Reunion.
It's not a pretty exercise. Things happen.
Yeah, go ahead and get this. Bitch, you been faked in a bitch. Bitch, you do it then. Do it then. Do it then.
Yikes. President of an NAACP branch, author, and life coach guru who calls herself a doctor of counseling psychology, which she allegedly isn't, and claimed to get that degree from Argosy University. She's built her career on being a relatable street therapist, which didn't fully hit me until I watched one of her interviews.
I'm letting you go raw on me. You busting nuts at me. But when I show you my wounds, I'm toxic. Who's really safe here? Because I'm not safe because you got a good stroke. And most women ain't even satisfied from it.
The more we hold off on what y'all usually want, that thing, the more y'all do anyways. The more y'all give and the more y'all do.
Just don't call her a therapist.
My biggest misconception about you, and at the end of the day, it was me hearing from other people about you being a therapist and practicing.
So I'm a psychology expert,
Sorry,
life coach.
yes.
She curses more than any mental health professional I've ever seen, uses a lot more slang, drops some truly basic Tyler Perry movie-esque psychology sound bites, and intentionally targets low-income communities that would fall for this kind of grift, unfortunately. That's evidenced by the relatively affordable prices on her website. She's a social media star, so please believe her rates would be in the tens of thousands in private practice if she was charging based on all the clout she brags about on her site and her capacity. That might lead you to say, well, she wants to serve people who can't afford therapy in the Black community, Cam. Interesting theory. We'll come back to that. One of her other honorary doctorates is from Harvest Christian University in 2025, which claims to be an indigenous university with multiple accreditations, all of which are bullshit. I searched for Harvest Christian University in the DAPIP database for accredited institutions in the US, and it doesn't show up. Their Royal Charter accreditation, maybe that would fly in the UK, but it definitely doesn't mean shit here. They list a couple more accreditations on the page, and neither of those show up on the CHEA website for approved accreditation agencies. This school is where you go to buy a degree in order to get away with calling yourself a doctor despite never earning a real doctorate. Her master's at University of Phoenix, since she claims that degree is in marriage, family, and child therapy, and the University of Phoenix has that course, it's gotta be it, right? That being said, that course is supposed to qualify students to receive their license in California. It's literally designed to do that. Since she said herself that she doesn't operate with a license, I'm side-eyeing that degree too.
Where did you get your start?
You might start as far as like a therapist. I started off as a marriage, family, child therapist about 18 years ago. Before I obtained my doctorate degree in counseling psychology. Once I became a doctor of psychology, I transitioned from a therapist to a psychology expert in private practice. And so I no longer practice under a license. I now am in private practice.
All the money down.
That's what I'm saying. And that's what people don't understand, right? So just to educate some folks a little bit, a license is really only needed so you can bill insurance. And let me go a step further. Majority of people who know that in order to bill insurance as a therapist or a physician or a psychologist, psychiatrist, you have to diagnose.
Okay.
Most people don't want to have a diagnosis on their record. So what do they rather do? Pay out of pocket.
We see this excuse used time and time again by grifters.
But the reality is, it's not about the degrees. I've never shouted, I have a bunch of degrees.
It is about the degrees. As for the part about servicing poor Black people who can't afford to bill insurance, I don't believe it. Positioning this grift as community service doesn't really match up with what I see on her site. Those packages are a clear money grab, focused on filling every potential avenue for profit via mass appeal and volume orders. In business terms, she's creating a fast food model for therapy. And I wouldn't be surprised if she has a team assisting her at this point.
Andrew, I have a team now. I self-published my first book.
After all this visibility and all those followers, there's no way she'd be able to handle all the incoming booking requests by herself. Truth be told, that's probably why she's trying to sell y'all a book instead. That's the exit strategy. There's a financing section on her site too. I looked up this company FlexBuy, and the reviews are atrocious. Multiple people claiming they were scammed, slamming customer service, and connecting the dots between her and the multi-level marketing companies that tend to use this for their clientele. Look, a lot of the economic model stuff I'm talking about is speculation, granted. The bulk of the proof I have to present y'all is tied to the doctorate, not her business model. I'm just throwing out ideas based on what I've seen in the past. Let's move on. Speaking of the doctorate allegations, she said this on The Breakfast Club.
The conversation about your doctorate because people can't find your dissertation online.
Mm-hmm.
How are you responding to that in this new era of your life?
I'm going to clear it up once on here. I'm not doing it again. And I'm clearing it up for my doc squad, for my fan base, for my audience who deserve to hear me address it. For the folks who have already made up their mind to not like me or not understand me, listen, I don't give a fuck what your narrative is. I would like for you to recreate it, double down on it, and run that shit. Because I don't give a fuck about it. Now, to my doc squad, my fan base, my folks, my village, it's very simple. I went to a school, Argosy University, completed an entire program. I went back online to get my official transcripts because I was applying to a law school many years ago to be a professor there. And I had to provide my transcripts, right, to get hired. And I went to contact the school and say, hey, I need my official transcripts. I need my entire thing. And there was no school. I was like, okay, I'm confused. I Google. It says this school has been shut down. I said, oh, well, they got to have records. I mean, they were accredited when I attended the school. They were accredited when I finished the program. I go and look, there is a third party that has the records. Why I contact the third party? That third party only holds records for 2 years.
I'm no psychologist, but I recognize toxic defensiveness when I see it, because I've done it. All that cussing and posturing wasn't necessary. If she was qualified, she could have just explained it in one sentence. Combine that with the iced out doc chain she wears everywhere, and this is starting to feel like a rap beef. All of Argosy University's diplomas can be retrieved from the Parchment site, which I checked out. They list the school and say they can deliver diplomas from Argosy. All she'd have to do is give them the necessary info. It would take less than 5 minutes all in. This was a lie. Furthermore, a lot of doctorate programs require a dissertation. Not saying hers did, since it's a PsyD like the degree Umar has. But in any case, she doesn't have a published dissertation either. I checked ProQuest, and her name pulls up 0 results. You don't need to be degreed up to call yourself a psychology expert and life coach, but that's where she slipped up. She didn't always call herself that. She used to say she has a doctorate in counseling psychology on her site, but now it just says she has 10 years of experience with that master's from the University of Phoenix. If she had the degree, she would say she has the degree on the site, especially since she says obtained in reference to her Cal State Northridge double degree. Obtained and pursued are very, very different words. She claims the master's on the homepage, but this paragraph insinuates that she didn't finish that one either. This bio hasn't changed since the earliest version of the site. So we might be looking at 2 fake degrees. I want to be clear that even if the University of Phoenix degree is real, this woman is clearly lying about that doctorate, in my opinion. That's all I have to say regarding the education stuff. She threw out a bullshit community service excuse regarding the licensure. Now, I want to close out discussing the ethics and show y'all that not only should this woman not be counseling anyone, the entire system of podcasts and radio shows she's leaning on for all this clout are enabling grifters. I know it's not revolutionary to make the point that the Joe Budden podcast is run by an intellectually dishonest Gen Xer backed up by dumbass yes men, but I'm not even focused on them. Even the people we look to as intellectual leaders in the Black community are complicit sometimes. Mark Lamont Hill is deeply respected in the podcast and TV political debate space, for good reason. By no means am I using this one moment to cast him aside or claim he doesn't have value. This was some bullshit, though.
I know therapy goes in a lot of areas, but it seems like one of the things that you really light up for is relationship conversations.
Relationship, Mark, and trauma.
Why?
Because I think that it doesn't matter our race, our gender, it doesn't matter our background. One thing that we all can relate on is adversity and some fucking trauma. It doesn't matter what race we are. You can sit a white person from the trailer park here and a black person from the hood. And they may not be able to relate as far as the exact same environment. But when you start talking about pain pockets and trauma, we're going to be relatable.
You heard this woman say she operates without a license and targets economically compromised black people. And your first comment after all that is, I've noticed that talking about relationships lights you up. Did she pay you to turn your brain off? I have evidence that you're sharper than this. I've seen you debate some sharp right-wing pundits and shut them down in real time on CNN. This kind of comes back to my stance on these kinds of podcasts and shows.
What was your response and why?
My significant issue was the statement that you only individuals only keep their licenses or get a license or obtain a license to bill insurance, and stating that it was just solely a billing strategy, and that is wholeheartedly untrue. And my biggest concern is more so with the fact that when it comes to mental health and well-being and it comes to access to resources, I always want everyone to have informed consent, right? The way I always describe it to my students is like, if there are 3 options and a doctor only provides you with 2 options and you choose one of the 2, that's not informed consent because you didn't get information on all the options. So whether it is like therapy or whether it is coaching or community support groups or medication, like the most important thing, especially when it comes to, I specialize in Black health and well-being, the Black community, is making sure we're being clear about what that actually is.
Those of us who know how harmful they are shouldn't regularly appear on them in the first place, regardless of how much clout it gives us. I say regularly because a one-off appearance might make sense given the circumstances, but becoming a regular on the Joe Budden podcast is not the best use of your time or brain, fam. Same for the Breakfast Club.
Just in
They
general.
are going to kill you online this week. They're going to say she has no records. They just want to hate you regardless.
DJ Envy, the same man who helped an obvious grifter pull off a real estate scam for the better part of a year or longer, says the internet is going to get you. Bro, why aren't you getting her? Why don't y'all have a research assistant that can look up some of this shit in real time? Even Joe Rogan's horrible show has that, even though he uses them super selectively. One grifter is never the focus. They're always the end result of a network of enablers and yes men, benefiting from the grifter's audience and influence. This is why I don't watch The Breakfast Club, Joe Budden, any show run by an athlete, especially if they're talking about anything outside of sports, etc.
What do you think is the greatest problem with being wealthy that people who are poor don't understand?
I don't give a fuck what your narrative is.
Why are we tolerating mental health professionals getting hostile when asked simple questions about their qualifications? If you ask me about my degree, I'd point to the wall and tell you when and where I got it from, down to the day. Please contact the Georgia Tech registrar. We got to demand more from people we choose to follow.
You know, I believe in seeking wise counsel. The Bible says seek wise counsel. Keyword, wise counsel. You got to be careful who's leading you. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. And because he decided to be disobedient when God told him to speak to the rock the second time and not hit it, he hit the rock. So that means they did not get into the promised land. But guess who else didn't get into the promised land? Everybody he led.
His followers.
Everybody he led. His followers. So what I'm saying is, especially within our community, we have to be a lot more apprehensive about who the fuck we following. I'm talking about from podcasts to doctors.
This woman giving people generic life advice would technically be fine as long as she wasn't representing herself as a real doctor. What isn't fine is calling yourself a psychology expert, pretending you got a doctorate in counseling psychology, then leaning hard into the grift machine. Speaking of the grift machine, I checked out the Wayback Machine. You saw that earlier when I showed you what her site used to say. Well, the first thing that pops up on that site is a course that she used to sell. What was that course about? Being your own boss, making 6 figures doing it. That's an earnings claim that's usually tied to multi-level marketing and scams. What kind of therapist simultaneously has a degree, has the ability to get licensed, and instead chooses to push a course? A grifter. I know this because I've researched a lot of fucking grifters at this point. I got nothing else for y'all. The evidence kind of speaks for itself. But if you want to argue with the facts.
Practicing without a license and people saying how unethical it is and things like that. I think when you cleared it up for me that I was misunderstood as far as why you practice the way you do and that it's still responsible, right? Can you speak to any other misconception that you think about yourself? Why do people really have this disdain for you in this space as far as speaking? This way?
So I think that people who have a disdain for me are people who are not ready to heal and they have accountability issue. And most of them have parental issues. See, we always talk about mommy issues when it relates to men. But why don't we talk about mommy issues when it relates to women?
And what that
Because
looks
women
like.
have mommy issues as well.
A lot, yeah.
Ma'am, I don't know what question you were answering just now, but this is a Wendy's. Y'all stay healthy.